Yeah? Can anybody hear me through the speakers? Anybody in the back at all? If I speak up a little bit? Okay, good deal. It's okay. I'm loud, so you'll probably be able to hear me anyways. Okay. Ooh, that's a little too loud. I didn't expect that. I was ready to speak up and everything. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's good to see all of you. Glad we're all here. Sorry I'm a little bit late. I was running behind today, so. We can go ahead and get started with some review questions. Everybody's favorite. Let's do some Noah review questions here. How many apostles did Jesus choose? What did the apostles do? What were they there for? Anybody know what apostle means? Sorry? One sent, right? They were there to witness, to follow in Jesus' footsteps, right? And then to go out into the world and to preach, right? Okay. No, weird. Those were Noah review questions. I don't know why they were so about Jesus. All right, let's do some Jesus review questions. How did Herod punish John the Baptist for his criticism? Put in prison. I don't know if this is referring to, we'll have to take a look in Luke 3:20 here. I don't know if this is referring to the ultimate, like the end, what happened. What did I say it was? Luke 3:20. Yes, he locked John up in prison. Okay. How did Jesus tell Nicodemus to be born again? Anybody remember who Nicodemus was? He was a Pharisee. In John chapter, or in John, I believe it. Can't remember the. Yeah, John 3, chapter 1. There was a certain man among the Pharisees named Nicodemus. He was a ruler of the Sanhedrin among the Jews. He came to John at night. That's always the big thing about Nicodemus. So he comes to Jesus. Nicodemus, what do I have to do? John says you have to be born, or Jesus says you have to be born again. And Nicodemus says, how can a man be born again? Jesus says, surely I say, of the water and Holy Spirit, that's how you must be born again. You cannot enter your mother's womb a second time. That's that whole discussion there. What else have we got? Lost my place. Okay. And then, lesson 70. What feelings did the people of Canaan have toward the Israelites and their God as described by Rahab in Joshua 2:9? Yeah. Yes, they're afraid. Joshua sent two... Okay. It was just phrased really weirdly. It says Joshua sent two men spies into what city? Two spies into what city? Jericho, where Rahab was. How did Rahab help the two spies escape from Jericho? She hid them, right? Okay. All right, so today we're going to be reading Joshua 5. You guys want to turn there? And could I get somebody to read, say, can we get somebody to read the first 7 verses? Well, yeah. Can I get somebody to read the first 3, and then we'll get somebody to read the next 3? We'll do it that way. Somebody want to read? Got it? Joshua 5, 1 through 3. Yeah.
As soon as all the kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan to the west, and all the kings of the Canaanites who were by the sea, heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of the Jordan for the people of Israel until they had crossed over, their hearts melted, and there was no longer any spirit in them because of the people of Israel. At that time the Lord said to Joshua, make flint knives and circumcise the sons of Israel a second time. So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the sons of Israel at Gibeah Haaraloth.
And then could we get somebody to read 3 through 6? Go ahead.
So Joshua made himself flint knives to circumcise the sons of Israel at Gibeah Haaraloth. This is the reason why Joshua circumcised them. All the people who came out of Egypt who were males, all the men of war, died in the wilderness along the way after they came out of Egypt. For all the people who came out were circumcised, but all the people who were born in the wilderness along the way as they came out of Egypt had not been circumcised. For the sons of Israel were 40 years in the wilderness, and so all the nation, that is, the men of war who came out of Egypt, perished because they did not listen to the voice of the Lord, to whom the Lord had sworn that he would not let them see the land which the Lord had sworn to their fathers to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey.
Right. So, we have this kind of strange thing here where the children of Israel aren't circumcised. And it's not clear why. It's all speculation as to whether, like, what the cause of it was. The generation that preceded this one is the one that disobeyed God and was fearful of entering into the land of Canaan and made to wander the wilderness for 40 years. So it's possible they just kind of did it almost spitefully. Like, well, who cares? He's going to make us wander the wilderness. We're not going to circumcise our sons. You know, who knows? But suffice to say, the scene that we're given here is the point that, or the point is that the children of Israel kind of stopped doing that practice while they wandered the wilderness. And so God tells Joshua again, make sure that you circumcise all the males, all the mans. And back in Genesis 17 actually is where that's commanded. This is why it's kind of strange, because in Genesis 17, I mean, you know, strange in that they knew they should have been doing it. I don't know why they would have stopped in the wilderness in particular. But God says to Abram, in chapter 17, Genesis 17, I will establish my covenant between me and you through your descendants, after which throughout your generations for an everlasting covenant to be God to you and to your descendants after you. And then he says, I will give you land, I will give you possession of property, I will be your God. This is the sign of my covenant, which you shall keep and faithfully obey between you and me. every one of you, every male, shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be the sign of the covenant between me and you. So then Abram goes and circumcises every man in the house, not just the descendants, but also any person that was in his house as a servant or any such thing. They're all circumcised. So it had been a practice for a long time, even through Egypt, and when they got out of Egypt, they had all the males circumcised as well. Then just for some reason wandering in the wilderness, they stopped doing it, and so he brought it back. Let's go ahead and read. Can I get somebody to read I think where are we at? Chapter verse 7? Can I get somebody to read the next 5 verses, please? We'll do 8 through 13, and then I'll finish out the last 2. Yeah, go ahead.
So he raised up their sons in their place, and these were the ones Joshua circumcised. They were still uncircumcised because they had not been circumcised on the way. And after the whole nation had been circumcised, they remained where they were in camp until they were healed. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you." So the place has been called Gilgal to this day. On the evening of the 14th day of the month, while camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, the Israelites celebrated the Passover. The day after the Passover, that every day they ate some of the produce of the land, unleavened bread and roasted grain. The manna stopped the day after they ate this food from the land. There was no longer any manna for the Israelites, but that year they ate the produce of Canaan.
Now when Joshua was by Jericho, he looked up, and behold, a man was standing opposite him with his drawn sword in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" He said, "No. Rather, I have come now as a captain of the army of the Lord." Then Joshua fell with his face toward the earth and bowed down and said to him, What does my Lord have to say to his servant?" The captain of the Lord's army said to Joshua, "Remove your sandals from your feet, because the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. All right, so we get a couple big things have happened in this chapter, right? They reaffirm the covenant with God by circumcising all the males. Then the manna stops. And the manna stops because obviously, now they're in the land of Canaan, they're in the promised land, they're eating the food that God has told them that they would get. It's kind of, I don't know, it makes sense, but it's kind of interesting that the manna didn't cease on the day that they ate or the day that they got in. It ceased on the day after they ate of the produce, which is kind of interesting. And then we get this strange scene with Joshua looking onto Jericho, and there's a figure that appears. Joshua says, "You on our side, not our side?" And the thing says no, which I just thought was really weird when I'm reading through this, like, especially with it being who it is. It's the captain of the Lord's army, right? He doesn't say that he's on their side. He just says, "No, I'm the captain of the Lord's army. I'm here for the Lord, not for you," right? Which is just another interesting, I think it was a reminder that, there was a covenant. And Joshua had, or not just Joshua, but the children of Israel had a part to uphold in all of this. And the captain of the Lord's army wasn't promised to them just because they were them. They were there, he was there for the covenant, right? And the idea was, the Lord will be with you. We can be on your side, or we can be your adversaries. How do you want to make it, right? It's how do you want to have this whole situation go down? The Lord's army is mentioned a couple times throughout the Old Testament, like just this idea of an actual angelic or spiritual host of an army. Trying to remember, is it David? Does anybody remember if David's the one who sees the Lord's army? There's a section in the Old Testament. I apologize, I haven't gotten this figured out yet, but somebody is standing outside before a big battle, and God says, "Turn around and look." And he opens his eyes and he sees the host of the Lord, in essence, and there's this large army standing behind him. And this is the army of the Lord, right? But we don't actually, so like this 3 verses is all that's mentioned of it. It seems kind of random put in there. But again, I think it exists there as a reminder just to not just to Joshua, but to the nation of Israel itself, that the Lord is present with them. He's there to help them, right? There is not just it's not just a kind of talking the talk situation. God is walking the walk also. He's there with them. He's got his army there, and the captain is there prepared to help them with Jericho. Anybody have anything in particular that interested them in this chapter, or anything that jumped out to them that we didn't discuss?
Well, I read a commentary on that, and it said it actually could have been Jesus,
Yeah.
or like set into like being.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was definitely somebody not of this earth.
Right. Yeah, that was always interesting to me. There's a couple times people think that Jesus might have appeared. Another time is with Saul's son. Oh my goodness. Jonathan, thank you. I forgot. His son Jonathan, right? He goes up, and do you guys remember that scene where Jonathan goes up and basically fights a whole Philistine camp by himself? And he sees somebody there. There's an angel of the Lord or a messenger of the Lord that appears to him, and he says, there's some people that think that was Jesus too. There's a couple times where it's the captain of the Lord's army or the angel of the Lord, like specifically the angel of the Lord, that appears, and people wonder if that's Jesus. And it could be. It's interesting how that works. Anything else? All right. Now we get into the Conquest of Jericho. We have some time. We have some more review questions, I think, that we could get into. I like these review questions. I think it's really good to remember where we're coming from, because a lot of these chapters are important to have the context with them. And sometimes, Jesus' apostles don't have to do with the context, but still good. Okay. What was the manner in which Pharaoh instructed the Egyptians to kill Hebrew baby boys? I don't remember myself. This is why we do the review. Exodus 1:22 is where it talks about that. Throw them in the Nile. Yep. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, every son who is born to the Hebrews must be thrown into the Nile, but every daughter you shall keep alive. Okay. That was it. Jesus told the Samaritan lady that God is A, spirit, B, flesh and bones, or C, of the imagination. You remember? That's in John 4:24. If anybody wants to turn and take a look. A, of the Spirit. God is of the Spirit. Then, I think that was it for that one too. Okay, here we are. Does anybody remember Joshua's father? I think that's a fun one. Nun. Joshua, the son of Nun. What feelings did the people of Canaan have towards the Israelites and their God as described by Rahab? We were just talking about that. They were scared, right? the biggest one. And that's going to come back again in the first couple verses here. So can I get, how many 26. 7. Now Jericho was a fortified city with high walls, and it was tightly closed because of the people's fear of the sons of Israel. No one went out or came in. The Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho into your hands with its king and the mighty warriors. Now you shall march around the city, all the men of war circling the city, encircling once. You shall do this for 6 days. Also 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets made of ram's horns ahead of the ark. Then on the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. When they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall cry out with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down in its place. And the people shall go up, each man straight ahead, climbing over the rubble." So I'm sure a lot of us have, or all of us have heard the story of Jericho before. It's pretty common. Why did God ask, or why did God tell the Israelites to do this particular thing? Any reason? Maybe? Yeah. I mentioned this when we were talking about the giving of the 10 Commandments, right? Like God tells Moses, "Come up, go down, come up, go down, come up, go down," right? Like 4 or 5 times before he actually gives him anything to go back down with. And I think this kind of applies to the same principle, where God is almost using the rule of ridiculous, where it's like, this is strange for anybody to do. And it's got to be weird. Like, who goes before the army and says, "Okay, look, we're not going to actually siege the city. We're just going to walk around it a couple times." And you got to imagine the frustration as everybody's like, "Why are we even doing this?" And, I don't know how many of us grew up with VeggieTales, but VeggieTales, I thought, did a good idea of this, because the whole time that the Israelites, the vegetables are walking around the wall, they're getting made fun of, right? And that's kind of the whole point, is even, I'm sure in this, that's exactly what happened. The Israelites walking around the walls, you got to imagine the minds of the people in Jericho, like, we were scared of these people? Why were we scared of these people? Because they're walking around and they're not even doing anything. They're dead silent walking around our walls. They have horns that go before them, horns, ram's horn that, they can be very loud, but they're not blowing them. They're not making any noise whatsoever, and it's super strange. Yeah, go ahead.
I think I have a different take on it, though.
Yeah?
You talk about 6 times going around the wall, blowing the horns, and they're proceeding with all this is the reputation of what Israelites are, that their God separated Jordan, and then all the other legends over the last 40 years that they've built up inside them, and they're almost a psychological build-up.
Right.
Every day, the legend, and then people, well, I hear tell they did this, and the psychological buildup of within the walls, and yet they don't have anything to fall back on, like the Israelites have of the Lord. So that when on the 7th day, they went around 7 times and the war cry screams from the Israelites. It's almost like they took down the walls themselves.
Right. Yeah, and that, to be totally fair and even, that absolutely makes sense. That's another thing. So the people of Jericho, right, had heard of God's parting of the Jordan River, and that was part of what made them scared, I'm sure, even though they were scared before that also. But yeah, so that could have been another thing. There's also, to be a fly on the wall, right? The wall of Jericho, but to know what went on inside the city, because it could have been very much that. It could have been a futile practice of sacrificing their own gods, right? That could have been another thing. It's like God saying, like, you're trying to lean on your gods, right? And for 7 days they're trying to, like, get this to stop or to protect themselves, and then on the 7th day God says, "No, I am more powerful," right? And shows them who's God. Yeah. So just interesting set of instructions. Can I get somebody to read verse 6 through 11? Yeah. Yeah?
So Joshua, son of Nun, called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it. And he ordered the people, advance, march around the city with the armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord. When the Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carried 7 trumpets before the Lord went forward, blowing their trumpets, and the ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. The armed guard marched ahead of the priests and blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the ark. All this time the trumpets were sounding, but Joshua had commanded the people, do not give a war cry, do not raise your voices, do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then shout. So he had the ark of the Lord carried around the city, circling it once. Then the people returned to camp and spent the night there.
Somebody want to read 12 through 16? That'll be a good grouping, I think. 12 through 16, anybody?
So Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priest took the ark and the ark of the Lord. 7 priests carried the 7 trumpets, went forward, marching before the ark of the Lord, blowing the trumpets. The armed men went ahead of them, and the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord while the trumpets kept sounding. So on the second day of the march around the city, once returned to the camp, they did this for 6 days. On the 7th day, they got up at daybreak and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner, except that on that day they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city and all that in it are to be devoured, or devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab and the prostitute and all who are with her house shall be spared, because she has hid the spice we wish to be sent.
Somebody got 18 through 22.
And by all means, abstain from the accursed things, lest you become accursed when you take of the accursed things, and make the camp of Israel a curse and trouble. But all the silver and gold, and vessels of bronze and iron, are consecrated to the Lord. They shall come into the treasury of the Lord. How far? I'm sorry.
22.
So the people shouted when the priest blew the trumpets, and it happened when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat. Then the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. And they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, young and old, oxen, sheep, and donkey, with the edge of the sword. But Joshua had said to the 2 men who had spied out the country, go into the harlot's house, and from there bring out the woman and all that she has, as you swore to her.
And then does anybody want to finish out 25 through 27? Everybody on the right side of the room? Awesome.
And Joshua spared Rahab the harlot, her father's household, and all that she had. So she dwelt in Israel to this day, because she had the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. Then Joshua charged them at that time, saying, cursed be the man before the Lord who rises up and builds this city Jericho. He shall lay its foundation with his firstborn, and with his youngest he shall set up its gates. So the Lord was with Joshua, and the fame spread throughout all the country.
So the walls come down. How many days did the Israelites march around the city? 7 days. On the 7th day was when they blew the horns. Who all marched around the city? That's in Joshua 6, 3 through 4. The priests. Yep. The priests the army, right? Or at least some of the armed men. Yeah, all the men of war. All the men of war. And then 7 priests, right? So who were the Israelites instructed to destroy? Who were the Israelites instructed to kill inside Jericho? Everybody. Men, women, children, except for Rahab. Yep, and her family. It's kind of a tough one. A lot of people, way smarter than me, have undertaken, and the animals, yeah, everything. Everything. There's not to be anything living that comes out of Jericho besides Rahab and her family. And a lot of people, way smarter than me, have tried to undertake reasoning through like why that was good, why God decided to do that, and why God told the people of Israel to do that. I don't know. Does anybody have any particular thoughts on this? Yeah. Hmm.
This is punishment for their sin. So they were so evil, they would sacrifice to their gods, and they would sacrifice their newborns.
Yeah.
I mean, they were so disgusting to God that it wasn't just giving a gift to the Israelites.
Right.
It was bringing retribution to these horrible people.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a punishment aspect to the Israel's entrance into the promised land. Did somebody else have a hand up? I don't know. Yeah.
I think there's any significance in the fact that there's 7 priests in 7 days, etc.
Yeah. I mean, there's right. There's significance in that, like 7 appears a lot in all over the Bible. 7 days of creation and 7 priests, and there's a whole bunch of 7s in the creation of the tabernacle, I think, like measurements, all other sorts of things like that. I don't know, as to particular significance, I don't think it really matters. I think God could have done it with 8 or 9 or 6 or, anything like that, other than it's just a number that God seems to use a lot, right? Yeah, like something like that. Right. Well, yeah, and I think, I don't know, I kind of go back and forth on this. I think there is a significance to it being 7, but I don't think that makes 7 as a number special. Does that make sense? Anything other than God uses it a lot. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that? Have anybody done any looking into that? Right. Yeah. He said it seems like it's the complete number. It's what God uses for the number of completion. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Yeah.
Back to your other question, a lot of times too, when the Israelites are, we do it too, we mix in with other cultures and things that are going on.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to pick up their bad habits.
Right.
Therefore, God was starting over.
Right.
Let his people through, so he was wiping away all that was there.
Yep. And it's interesting, not only like people, but things too. And he talks about the ban about don't take anything for yourself. All of the gold, all the silver, everything that's precious goes to God. Other than that, burn it. Like none of it should be taken with you. Keep everything away from yourselves that's under the ban so that you do not covet them. Take some things under for personal gain. And put the camp of Israel under the ban, which we'll see why, or we'll see what God means by that in the upcoming chapters, but because go figure somebody doesn't follow that, right? But God takes it seriously. God was not joking around when he said, don't get anything out of this. Just interesting how important it was.
If we look at Jericho's the first city that they came,
Right.
this is to set the stage for the rest of what's coming, and some people will be so frightened and some will, it's
Right.
it's to make sure that
Right, right. And it could even, along the same vein, it could just be a warning almost to the other people, right? Like we're not here for spoils. We're here because we're doing what God has asked us to do, right? Yeah. Did you have something else you were saying?
I was just saying, the same thing had happened throughout the Old Testament. Even
Yeah.
Israel tried to take the household gods with her, and she left. And was told not to.
Yeah. Okay. One other interesting thing. So, does anybody know, is Jericho ever rebuilt? Yes. Yeah, it gets rebuilt. What? I think it is on that location. We can take a look at it. It's in 1 Kings 16, but before we go there, 6:26 and verse 26. So then Joshua made them take an oath at that time, saying, "Cursed before the Lord is the man who rises up and rebuilds the city, Jericho. With the loss of his firstborn he shall lay its foundation, and with the loss of his youngest son he shall set up its gates." So if we swap over to 1 Kings chapter 16 here, I think we'll end up having to close with this. First Kings chapter 16. Okay. Verse 34. So it's talking about Ahab. So he erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria. Ahab also made the Asherah. Ahab did more to provoke the Lord of God of Israel than all the kings of Israel who were before him. So we're in a rough time in Israelite history. And in his days, Hiel the Bethelite rebuilt Jericho. He laid its foundations with the loss of Abiram his firstborn, and set up the gates with the loss of his youngest son Segub, in accordance with the word of the Lord which he spoke through Joshua the son of Nun. So it was rebuilt, and it was just as Joshua said it was. The person lost his firstborn and his youngest as he rebuilt the city. Yeah, that city is, yes, not in the same spot, right? For sure. All right. Yeah. Did anybody else have anything in particular that they thought was interesting or wanted to talk about before we go?
Well, I didn't see the VeggieTale one, but
Oh, yeah. That's okay. I'm subject matter expert.
I saw several of them.
Right.
Anyway, the verse 1, and going back to Jericho was tightly shut up because of the Israelites.
Right.
They were definitely afraid, and they sealed the city. The city is not that big, I guess, but it was fortified very well.
Right.
And then, can you imagine when they're marching around? I mean, just think if we had some foreigners coming here marching around Lancaster real quiet, like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And also the shout.
Yeah. The shout, I absolutely agree, would have been very terrifying. Yeah. I have a note. I don't know exactly how they know this, but I do have a note that says that the city measured less than a half mile in circumference. So it was it was pretty small. But
And then verse 27 is this, so the Lord was with Joshua and his fame spread throughout the land. So
right.
News traveled.
Yes.
So you can imagine now, what happened and all the neighboring cities and everything.
Right. Yeah. Everybody knows the news is spreading. So, and we'll start to see more of that as we continue on reading through Joshua. Thank you guys for your comments and your attention. Appreciate it. See you guys next week for Joshua 7 and 8.